Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul, and in this RedGamingTech.com video, we're going to be discussing and analysing both AMD and Intel's CES 2020 events. I hope you're all having an amazing day. Do let me know in the comments down below if you watched either of the company's events and what you thought of their particular announcements. Since they're first alphabetically, we'll start things out with AMD. And AMD's announcements this year were perhaps not as exciting as what some people had expected. There was no big Navi announcement, they didn't even mention anything about the Zen 3 microarchitecture, and they also did not disclose anything about the second generation of RDNA either. With this said, what they did do is double down on their mobile product lineup, and there was a lot of stuff on Renoir, which of course is a Zen 2 based APU with Vega based graphics. And other than that, the real big announcement, to be honest, was the final pricing and some performance data of the 3990WX, which is the 64-core Threadripper. Other than that, there was a lot of stuff for the desktop RX 5600 XT, but since so much stuff had leaked about that, it didn't really come as much of a surprise. With that said, let's start to dig into this. I'm going to start with the announcement that I found most interesting, and that would be the third generation Threadripper product. This is going to cost you $4,000 and will launch on the 7th of February 2020, so basically a month from now. So, what do you get for almost $4,000, which is essentially double the price of the 32 core, which launched last year, the 2990WX? Well, you immediately can enjoy a whopping 288 megabytes of total cache, 64 cores of course, which will provide 128 threads. Features a base clock of 2.9 GHz and a boost clock of 4.3 GHz. This is all with a TDP of just 280 watts, which is by the way identical to the 32 core version. What you are basically getting here is a high-end EPYC chip, albeit with fewer professional level features and of course fewer memory channels. I'd like to reiterate that this is not going to be a product that the average person would want to purchase and is well outside the performance needed for even the average kind of home user who does like 3D rendering or hobbyist or something like that. But for professional studio users or power users, this chip is about the best you can get outside of most server-based processor solutions like EPYC. We don't really have many benchmarks. The only real tangible benchmark which provided us any insight into the real-world performance was a V-Ray render demo. This pitted the Threadripper 3990WX at, once again, $4,000 against a dual Xeon platform, which is the 8280. So this Intel platform has 56 cores, 112 threads, and costs $20,000. And surprisingly, given AMD are showing us the demo, the Threadripper processor won out by around 30%. So obviously that's quite substantial, and while $4,000 is an awful lot of cash, compared to $20,000 that a studio would need to cough up to get a slower Intel solution, well, it doesn't seem too bad, does it? Remember, the more you buy of these, in Jensen Huang's own words, the more you would save. So on to the announcement that surprised literally no one at all because of so many leaks recently, thanks to multiple AIB partners, which I'm sure pleased AMD no end, and that is the RX 5600 XT. As far as I understand, this is Navi 10 based. There were a few reports floating around that it was Navi 12, but it looks to be Navi 10. Anyway, semantics aside, it's a 36 compute unit behemoth, 2304 stream processors, which has a peak of 7.19 teraflops, assuming you don't buy, of course, an AIB overclocked model. And with that said, this is identical to what has leaked in the past, including the memory bus and memory configuration as a whole actually. 6 GB of memory and a 192-bit bus. So this will provide a total of 288 GB per second of memory bandwidth, 192-bit bus with 12 Gbps modules. This is compared to 448 GB per second on the RX 5700. So while the number of compute units is identical, albeit running at slightly slower clock speeds than the RX 5700, what the difference here is simply the bus width has been cut, and we also have a slower memory clock, which is definitely going to impact performance in higher resolutions. I would be curious to see what happens regarding overclocking the memory. Hopefully you can squeeze an additional several hundred megahertz on the RAM. That would be absolutely amazing. But AMD are calling this the ultimate 1080p gaming card. Now, looking over the performance data, they are pitting it against the GTX 1660 Ti. And without any question, it is faster. I mean, how much faster, obviously, as always, does depend upon the title. But you're looking at anything from 10% to 30-ish% in best case scenarios. The problem I have with this is really the pricing. So, once again, AMD are charging $280 for this GPU, which is around 100 more than the RX 5500, and is not that much different from the RX 5700. The MSRP of the RX 5700 is $350 US, although I have seen them for cheaper, particularly in sales. I believe over Christmas they went to about 310-ish, 320-ish, which honestly is not a hop, skip, and a jump from the base pricing of the RX 5600 XT. And the biggest problem is that, yes, the GTX 1660 Ti is outperformed here, but the thing is, honestly, the GTX 1660 Ti you would be insane to buy anyway. Even if AMD never produced a graphics card again, you would still never want to buy a GTX 1660 Ti now. Not that the Ti is a bad card, it's just that the Super pretty much just ruins the GTX 1660 Ti's day. Indeed, it actually ruins the vanilla 1660's day as well. I recently covered this in a review, so I'll throw in a couple of graphs here, but you can see the performance of the Super, and the Super is also considerably cheaper as well. Is the 5600 XT a bad card? No. I would have liked, however, it to be $20 less, 20 to $30 less, and I think this would have been an amazing card. As it is, it's not bad, I just wish it was slightly cheaper. The bulk of discussion from AMD was actually around the APUs and mobile. Not really surprising, given how lucrative the mobile space is, and it's not like AMD's previous products have been awful, but compare them against the 4000 series, and they are quite awful actually. AMD are touting a huge performance per watt gain, up to twice the performance per watt. Around 70% of that is thanks to the 7nm process, and around 30% of that is IPC and design improvements. So we have the 4800U, which is a 15 watt part, and has an 8-core 16 thread configuration, Zen 2 base, and this is with a Vega-based GPU. All of the 4000 series are Vega-based, and that is up to 8 compute units. The base frequency is 1800 MHz, but the turbo frequency is up to 4200 MHz. Meanwhile, the highest in SKU, which is going to be aimed at more like gamers and content creators, is the 4800H. It's still an 8-core 16-thread processor, albeit with higher clock frequencies, so the base is 2.9 GHz, 4200 MHz for the turbo. It's got 7 compute units, but the iGPU is running at a faster clock frequency, and the TDP here is 45 watts, and obviously this will be a lot more aggressive when turboing, and can turbo up to 54 watts, nomming lots of energies. So clearly the biggest difference here is regarding the base clocks. So, with all of that said, another feature that was added as well is the Smart Platform. This is known as SmartShift. There was some confusion initially by many folks exactly what this is. Like, I don't think AMD explained it particularly well on stage, honestly. But basically, it's kind of like a power delivery mechanism. So, if you're playing a game quite frequently the CPU is obviously not the limiting factor. Mostly it's the GPU. So what does it do? SmartShift will be like, okay, well, this, let's say 45 watt power budget can now go to the GPU more, so the GPU will run at a higher clock frequency, and obviously the CPU will kind of adjust itself accordingly, and this will be consistent, so it will constantly monitor the performance and strain, I guess you could say, on both components. And according to what AMD demoed on stage, there was around a 10% improvement in the division, whereas Cinebench improved by 12% with it enabled. AMD are still trying to improve this technology, but still, it looks quite promising. Ultimately, AMD have a pretty robust ecosystem of laptops that they are building. Lots of partners, Lenovo, Dell, and so on and so on. And performance is definitely up there. It's faster than Intel's equivalent processors, such as the 10th generation 1065 G7, which is a very easy name to remember, and I totally didn't have to make a note of that. So yeah, there's not much to say. Single thread performance is faster, equivalent essentially to Ice Lake, and multi-thread performance, well, basically wins across the board. So then, from AMD, moving to Intel. What did Intel show us? Well, mostly stuff revolving around AI, although they did also disclose some details concerning Tiger Lake, and I have to say it does look rather impressive. Intel also assures us that we will see this architecture launch this year. Furthermore, we also learn some further details of XE, or rather DG1, which is the lower end SKUs in Intel's upcoming discrete graphics. They also provide a demo as well, so let's jump into that. So Tiger Lake first. Tiger Lake is going to bring improvements to AI acceleration, much better graphics. It's up to twice the performance in graphics over Ice Lake, which is pretty impressive when you think about it. And also, Tiger Lake is going to have Thunderbolt 4 support, Wi-Fi 6, Gigabit Ethernet, and much more besides. Furthermore, Willow Cove has an awful lot of design changes. It's not just like, oh, it's faster graphics. For one, the cache has been radically redesigned. I've discussed that in various leaks before. And this is going to certainly bring an awful lot of optimization to upcoming application performance. We also have optimizations in terms of the architecture as a whole, plus security enhancements. The security enhancements are going to be of critical importance because obviously some of the recent updates in security have regressed Intel's performance when it comes to IPC. So one of the things that Tiger Lake does is bring performance enhancements in general, but also it has mitigations in hardware for the security flaws. So basically, in theory anyway, you're not only going to get an IPC gain simply because, oh, it's a better architecture, but you also get an IPC gain simply because, well, if you don't want your system to be hacked into, you are basically hitting a performance penalty here. So they're going to be in a much more even playing field to what AMD are with Zen 2. Obviously, Zen 2 does not have the security let's say oversights of, let's say, the Skylake architecture. So that's good. I'm very happy that Intel have done that. I'm not saying that we should give them a commendation because, oh well, your processor is not full of security holes. I'm simply saying that I'm glad that that's the case because obviously the competition is good. Gregory M. Bryant confirmed that Tiger Lake is going to be shipping in numerous products this year. Furthermore, to reiterate that, he actually showed PCBs of the processor. This is for both a Tiger Lake U and a Y, and they also showed off a laptop as well. I would absolutely love for this to be in a desktop processor now. I know I keep repeating myself, but I want Intel to be as competitive as possible. I mean, it would just help us as consumers at the end of the day. Even if you prefer AMD, that's fine. But the stronger Intel is, the more it pushes AMD. And yeah, I'm really hoping that Intel push AMD as heavy as possible because it's just been amazing for us as consumers. Anyway, the other big thing would be the DG1, the discrete graphics. So it's only the low power variant. This is not something that you're going to be able to play 4K games on or anything like that. But what they did do is demonstrate it running Destiny 2. Unfortunately, there were no frame rate metrics. There was no way to say, oh, this is the frame rate. And they didn't also disclose, like, you know, what the performance targets are of it exactly. So there was a lot of, what's the word? There was a lot of floaty stuff around this. Like, we don't exactly know what the configuration of the game was. We do know, of course, this is a longer term roadmap for Intel. And when it comes to the high end, we can expect, well, you know what, Raja Koduri, he called it the father of all GPUs when he referred to Ponte Vico, which is exascale. He said that it's the biggest GPU that's ever been designed. Biggest does not necessarily equate to performance, but still. So yeah, apparently the DG1 is going to operate at a power envelope of around 25 watts. I'm hearing up to 50 watts. But, you know what, I don't mind, as long as it puts out a decent amount of performance for a cheap price. Because ultimately, if you're like a gamer that doesn't do like much gaming, maybe play esports or something like that, only having, you know, AMD and Nvidia, it's great, it's fine, but more competition is good. I'm just hoping that Intel really hit out the park on the higher end GPUs. The low end ones, I don't have as much interest in personally, but I am excited to see what we can expect from Intel's GPUs in the long term. Unfortunately, there's just not enough details other than what I've just covered here to really go into this as an analysis. But yeah. Oh, I did mention there was some Comet Lake news, and this actually is a leak. So this is not official by any stretch of the imagination. And I'm throwing it in here because, quite frankly, it's not ideal test situations. It was discovered by Momomo on Twitter, and it actually is from a market reporter website. I believe it's Japanese. But what we have here is a 10-core chip with a base frequency of just 2.5 gigahertz. Which is way lower than what we expect for the 10900K. The base is actually said to be 3.7 gigahertz, and quite frankly, these engineering samples are not ideal in terms of clock frequency at all. And also, it's only a Cinebench run. So we have a 6-core, 12-thread part, which is running at 3 gigahertz, which provides a grand total of 2,928 points in Cinebench R20. And the 20-thread, 10-core engineering sample, which was probably going to be the 10900K, is scoring 4,215, which is obviously slower than even the 9900K, which usually scores in the low 5,000 mark. It's usually around 50. I believe my Cinebench R20 score with the 9900K is like 5,200, 5,300 overclocked to 5 gigahertz. So obviously there's a lot of room for improvement as clock speeds increase. There's not much more to say about this. It's an engineering sample, but I just wanted to throw it in the video. So then, with all of that said, what do I personally think of both companies' events? Well, frankly, I think that they delivered basically what I expected. A few days ago, I did release a video that Narve 21/Big Narve would not be at AMD's CES event, and I was pretty confident about that given how reliable my source is. And honestly, the fact that they doubled down on the mobile side of the equation just makes sense. In the end of the day, there's millions of laptops being sold per month, and AMD are literally leaving money on the table to not have a competitive solution. So, you know, for them to go ahead and leapfrog what Intel currently have available in terms of a comparison product just makes sense. And it's going to be interesting to see how Tiger Lake starts to compete with AMD in the future. As for Threadripper, I know that some people's eyes were watering at the $4,000 price tag, but then again, it's essentially a cut down 64-core EPYC with a few changes here or there. And honestly, if you compare it against comparable solutions to Intel, which are like, you know, $20,000 or whatever, it starts to look extremely reasonable. This is not something that the average home user is going to want to invest in, but then again, if you are a content creator professionally, so for example, you work at like a 3D studio, or maybe you do an awful lot of work in the visual effects industry, even if you're a freelance individual, then that would make sense as an investment. And in those cases, of course, time equals money. As for Intel, I would have loved for them to show more details of their plans for XC and their discrete GPUs as a whole, but it kind of makes sense. Honestly, I was 50-50 whether they would show anything for discrete graphics at all, so it's nice that we actually saw something being shown off. And as for Tiger Lake, yeah, I think it looks pretty cool. I will remain on the fence until we see further performance comparisons, and I would have loved for them to show more stuff for desktop, and by more stuff I mean anything really of, well, merit at all, because they didn't show anything. But other than that, it was a reasonable event for both companies. Nothing exactly which would set the world on fire, but I don't think it was an exactly disappointment. I think they both kind of hit the mark that I expected. But let me know in the comments below if they failed to meet your expectations. And with all of that said, hopefully you will have enjoyed the video. If you did, then of course like and subscribe to the channel. And I'll see you soon. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.